Hello, I'm Edwin Ellis. I'm a professor at the University of Alabama, and I'm the author of the Make Sense Strategies Toolkit. And in this presentation, we're going to be looking at the K-3 Common Core Language Arts standards and different ways you can use the Make Sense strategies when you're addressing those standards. And so this will be a series of 3 videos. And in part 1, we'll take a look at using the Smart Sheets to teach reading and those reading standards. And then we're going to take a look at how to use them when you're addressing vocabulary in the second video. And then the last one, we're going to be looking at using smart sheets for teaching writing at the emerging literacy level. So right now, let's just focus on reading. In terms of those Common Core standards, there's 3 major categories for reading. One is key ideas and details, craft and structure, and integration of knowledge and ideas. Now, each of those categories has strands of standards that address specific types of language literacy. So for an example, under ask and answer questions, there'll be a series of standards that address that in grades K, 1, 2, and 3, and of course each get a little more sophisticated. There'll be a series of standards for summarizing main ideas and details, as well as making relationship connections. Under craft and structure, primarily focusing on determining word meanings, then providing reasons and supporting points and making comparisons. For an example, there's a series of K-3 standards for asking and answering questions. And you can see that each one of these gets, all of them addressing ask and answer questions, but each gets a tiny little bit more specific and more advanced. Likewise, we'll be looking at some of the smart sheets that you can use when addressing the ask and answer question standards. Same thing with summarizing main ideas and details. Now, in the K-3, you really have 2 different types or subcategories of standards for summarizing. One is specific ones for reading literature and a different set for reading informational text. And we'll be looking at samples of those. So basically, this presentation is going to really just look at different ways teachers have used various Make Sense strategies, smart visuals to address all of these different types of standards and so forth. Later on in a different video, we'll examine some instructional scaffolding routines that teachers can apply for using them. So right now we're just looking at samples of how teachers have used them, and then later on we'll look at very specific instructional procedures for putting them to work. This is the home page of the Make Sense strategies. And as you can see, there are major categories of different types of smart sheets. Organizer smart sheets are generic versions. These are ones that are specifically designed for targeting essential understandings of things like literature, writing, vocabulary, history, and science, and so forth. Smart planners for teachers, this deals with instructional design, planning units, and things like that. And then the last section deals with smart planners for leaders. Now, if you're a K-3 teacher, then the ones that are best used for teaching K-3 literature and addressing those standards are going to be from this category, literature, and there are also quite a few from the more generic organizer smart sheets that you can use. Likewise, if you're doing informational text on the K-3 level, then the ones you're going to use are probably going to be best from this category. So let's take a look at this ask and answering questions. If we were to address standards from there, what I would do is we'd go down and click on this area under literature over here where it says questions. And what will open up is a page of various smart sheets, and each of these have different smart visuals, each designed to address ask and answering questions in different ways, and some more sophisticated than others. So for an example, if we took a look at the questioning caterpillar, you have these prompts like what's the title of the story, who is in it, what happened, where did it take place, and when. So these are very simple, basic kind of question prompts. And here's another one that's basically your ice cream, layers of ice cream that for addressing these different types of questions. Here's an example of how a student developed one of these when writing about a chair from my mother. This one where the questions are a little more elaborated, like what happened, where did it happen, etc. And so these are all basic story grammar types of questions. Now here's one where you get a little bit more specific in terms of moving into information processing and related standards. So you have a character, title, and author, but what would be a description of the character to use at the beginning of the story, and then what caused the character to change? So you see, this is no longer just a who, what, when, where, but it's more specific. What caused the character to change, and how would you describe the character at the end of the story? So this is sort of the precursor of standards that follow down the road that get much more sophisticated in terms of character analysis. But we'll begin with this and get some more sophisticated with it down the road. So here's an example of how that might look. Now I'm going to be sort of flying through these examples and going more quickly than you're going to have an opportunity to read in terms of reading all the prompts or what teachers or students listed. So there are a couple of things you can do if you would really like to see those. One is to pause the video and take your time and study the prompts. And the handouts that will accompany this also has these samples on those, so you can take your time and leisurely just kind of study each of the samples if you'd like. Likewise, all of the samples that I'm sharing with you here are also on the Make Sense Strategy software, and I'll show you where you can find those a little bit later. Now, here's an example of where the prompts get a little more sophisticated. And so you have things like what's the title and the setting, who are the characters. Now, what led up to your favorite part of the story? What happened during your favorite part of the story? What's a reason why you liked it? And 2 details to support your reason. What's another reason why you liked it? And 2 supporting details. And so this is basically done in a Q&A type format. But also, what you might notice is this is also kind of the precursor to beginning to teach students how to provide reasons and supporting points when they're doing persuasive writing and so forth. In terms of summarizing main ideas and details, when you're addressing those kinds of standards, the hierarchic types of smart sheets from the organizer section are really good for doing that. And so here's an example of a simple one main idea hierarchic. And so you have Byron from the Watsons Go to Birmingham, and then key features of Byron. So that's a very simple one. Here's one with 2 main ideas. Now this one's dealing with more of content or information text type of stuff. 3 main ideas. Now, also in addition to the hierarchic organizer smart visuals, if you click on character analysis, what we'll be doing is looking at ways of summarizing in main ideas and details about each of the characters. And now what we'll be using are what are called discipline-specific prompts, which are prompts embedded onto the graphic organizers designed to cue the student to think about the character in very specific ways. So if you click on that, what will open up is this page, Character Analysis. And notice that there are 2 pages of them. We're on page 1, so if we clicked on page 2, that would give us an even greater variety. And so for an example, if we take this simple one here, and so you have the name of the book, what was the character's name, what are words that describe the character, and draw a picture of the character. This is one of my favorite ones. It's called the Character Train. And so you have the title, the setting, what's the basic plot, what's the name of one of the characters, draw a picture, and what are words that describe that character, and so forth. Now remember, these are interactive, which means that you can open these up on screen and type on them. You can print them out and students can draw pictures on them, or you can import pictures into these. I like to import the pictures of the front of the book that we're reading and put the book cover on the graphic as well. And then you can save these to folders for use in the future. Now here's an example of footprints sequence. And so this is basically the sequence of the plot. So you have what happened at the beginning, then this happened, so then this happened, so this happened next, and what happened at the end of the story. Here's an example of ways to use Make Sense when we're focusing on standards related to make relationship connections. And so the one I like to use is Story Problem. If you click on that, then this page will open up, and there are a variety of ones that you can use here. Some of these are going to be more appropriate for K3, and some are definitely way more sophisticated than that. So let's take a look at addressing the problem. And so you have a story and the author. Describe a problem that's happening in the story. What are key events that happened? Who are the characters? And what was the solution to the problem? So it's kind of straight up, simple prompts. This is one for there's an owl in the shower. You can also use some of the basic cause and effect generic smart visuals for addressing relationship connections. So if you click on that, it'll open up this page. And so let's just take a look at the two main idea cause and effect box. So basically you have, or box frame, you have this, cause this, and then supporting details underneath, and so what happened. So here's an example of how a student used that one. Here's one on Michael Jordan and pursuing a dream. And so this, Michael's team's lost their basketball game, caused this. He asked his mom what he could do to get better. And then these are the essential details about each. And then so what at the bottom. So what's important to understand about this, if you're patient, work hard, and pray, you can be a winner at anything you do. Making relationship connections. This is one with, it's more of an information book about how families change. So this is when, then, because. Now we're going to jump over to making comparisons. And so on the generic organizer smart visuals, there are a bunch of them there that you can use with K3. And so for an example, you can use a basic Venn, but instead of circles, they look more like this, and that's because this form is much more conducive to typing on and saving than the circles. And remember, they're interactive. So here would be an example of a basic compare and contrast from information text. Likewise, there are some that provide spaces for adding subcategories and then making the comparisons, like what the person was like, what the person's community was like, and what the person did. And so here we're comparing Johnny Appleseed with the Wright brothers. So in this case, we're comparing two information textbooks. And what I've done, or what you would do, is decide what are the categories of information that you want to compare ahead of time, because students are really not very good at doing this, but then you can facilitate with them the development of the information that goes into the actual comparisons. This is a slightly more sophisticated version of it. This is a basic matrix, and now we're not so much looking at similarities and differences, but just a straight up comparison. And so this is an example of frog versus toad. Of course, these are the different dimensions we're looking at, and there's a so what at the bottom. And these are pictures that were imported.